I was born with a congenital heart defect known as transposition of the great arteries. In other words, that means that the two main arteries carrying blood to and from my heart were switched, and it appeared as if my hands and feet were blue. Now, this transfer of arteries affected my blood and oxygen circulation so that I wasn't able to fully breathe on my own. I was born at the University of California Davis Medical Center in Sacramento, and I had an amazing team of pediatric cardiology specialists helping me. They kept me alive in the neonatal intensive care unit until I had my surgery 10 days later. Since the surgery, I have been completely healthy. But in my life, I have asked so many questions and wondered so many things about UC Davis and the team that helped me. I wonder how the surgery was performed and how I was taken care of and who helped to take care of me. So now, 15 years later, I'm going on a journey to get those questions answered.
When Solomon was born, he came out and his hands and feet were blue, and I didn't realize anything was wrong, and then there was a nurse who was there who recognized there was a problem and whisked him away to the NICU. So about 5 hours later, I was taken to my hospital room, and two of the doctors came to see me to explain what they had diagnosed in a short time. So it was all very surreal that this was the first time we were hearing what was going on with Solomon, and Jeremy had gone home at that point, was asleep. So the next day we met with the surgeon, and we just took it one day at a time.
I particularly remember when the surgeon came out of the surgery 10 days later, and he just had this look on his face, and I think it lasted like 5 or 6 hours, the surgery, and he came out and he had this look on his face, and he was really pleased with himself, and he said, "Yeah, I'm really pleased with the way this went. Those little coronary arteries, I really like the way those came out. I think everything's going to be fine." And that was just a really, really great feeling, because that left us feeling like this was going to be okay.
So now after 15 years, I'm going back to California to meet my pediatric cardiology team that took care of me during my surgery, during my first few weeks of life. And they're located at UC Davis Medical Center in Sacramento. And we are currently on our way to the airport. My mom is going to come on with me, and we are meet them and talk about what happened, I guess, and have some fun. Let's go! Alright, now we're at UC Davis Medical Center. Let's go! Dr. Mark Parrish, MD, is the Chief of the Division of Pediatric Cardiology at UC Davis Medical Center. He specializes in the evaluation and medical treatment of children with heart disease or possible heart disease. I got to sit down with him and hear the in-depth analysis of the defect and the procedure.
The biggest problem before the surgery is that the blood that's going to the lungs comes back to the heart and goes right back to the lungs. And the blood that's going to the body goes to the body and comes right back to the body and goes back to the body again. And so that means that the blood is circulating in parallel, and it's not meant to do that. Really, it has to cross over. The blood to the lungs has to go to the body and vice versa. And if it doesn't happen that way, you die. So that with your heart disease, babies will die unless there's some crossing over the blood. So the initial efforts to tide kids over until the surgery done try to create some way of that crossover occurring.
I also met up with Celia Buckley, the pediatric cardiology nurse specialist at UC Davis, who personally looked after me during my days in the hospital and helped my parents deal with the stressful time. She showed me the way my blood flowed before the surgery took place.
So this is where the blood from the body comes into the right half of the heart, goes to the right ventricle, and then goes out to the aorta instead of to the lungs. And blood from the lungs is coming back to the left side of the heart, going to the left ventricle, and going to the pulmonary artery instead of going to the lungs. So essentially what you have is the right blue blood being pumped out to the body, and the red oxygenated blood being pumped to the lungs. And so the only way that children survive is through two fetal structures that were present before birth.
I had a few questions that I needed to ask them in order to understand a bunch of the other aspects of the defect. Not just, how the blood flow was working. So, my first question that I asked Dr. Parrish was, what types of procedures have been used on patients with transposition of the great arteries?
There's really two methods right now that are done for that. One is to literally rip a hole inside the heart to allow some mixing to occur on the little thin wall that's in the upper chamber. And the ripping is done with a little catheter and balloon that's passed up the blood vessel. And the other method is to give a medicine that opens up a artery that all babies have, but it tends to close very quickly. And the medicine causes it to stay open. That mixes between the two large arteries of the body. And the combination is sometimes done. We sort of decide based on how a baby's doing, what you need to do, and how quickly the surgery is going to be able to be done. So a couple of techniques to try to tide babies over for a while. And sometimes babies do need support to stay alive in other ways that are not specific. They sometimes need a breathing machine to breathe for them, a few things like that. But it's variable, not always.
As I said before, I was put in an incubator for 10 days before I had the surgery. This made me want to know how long the wait usually was for many different patients. So I asked Celia Buckley how long that wait is.
We prefer to do surgery on newborns with transposition of the arteries within a 7 to 10 day window. If you wait longer, the part of the heart that's pumping to their body is going to be the part that pumps to their lungs and vice versa. And the part that's going to the lungs isn't working very hard and it gets lazy. It actually loses some of its ability if you wait longer than about 10 days. So usually we usually wait a couple of days after birth, 3 days or so, and allow everything to be stabilized from that transition to birth, and then plan the surgery at a time when everybody can be there. It's not an emergency in the middle of the night kind of surgery. You plan it when you have all the staff that's going to give you the best surgical outcome that you can have.
Finally, I really needed to know if any of the defective heart symptoms could come back during my lifetime. Because if they could, I would really need to look out for that and find the right treatment. So I asked Dr. Parrish.
For somebody to look fabulous, everything to look great in the first couple of years, and then have something 10, 15, 20 years later is not unheard of, but it's close to unheard of. I can think of probably one very rare problem that could crop its head up later, but it's really, really unusual. And in fact, the one that we know of that can crop up later, usually if you look back, there might have been some clue about it right at the time the surgery was done as being a problem. So the real answer is no. We don't get unexpected problems that we haven't seen issues with early on, with the qualification provided by the lawyers that strange things sometimes happen.
Well, there you have it. My great life story and the answers to a lot of my questions. And I hope you enjoyed it, because it certainly means a lot to me. Thanks for watching.